So let's talk about King Charles III, the man who waited longer for a promotion than anyone in modern history and finally got the job when he was 73. And what a job! You spend your life preparing to be king of a country that mostly wants you to wave politely, shake a few hands, and ideally avoid saying anything remotely controversial. It's like being told since birth that your destiny is to become the mascot of Britain. Before we continue, let me know which other public figures you would like me to analyse, and I know you're probably thinking about Keir Starmer, or Nigel Farage, or Trump. Great, already done. Check the other videos or click on the playlist in the description. Alright, here we go. Let's rewind to the beginning. Charles Philip Arthur George, born on the 14th of November 1948 in Buckingham Palace. Yes, the man literally came into this world surrounded by more gold-plated furniture than a Las Vegas casino. His mother, of course, was Elizabeth, the woman who set the record for the longest reign in British history, which meant Charles basically spent his whole adult life in the world's slowest-moving queue. His childhood? Not exactly the stuff of cosy bedtime stories. He was packed off to Gordonstown, a brutal Scottish boarding school where comfort was illegal and hugs were considered a security risk. The headmaster believed in toughening kids up through cold showers, long runs, and casual emotional neglect. It was basically Navy SEAL training, except without the guns and with more Latin homework. Not surprisingly, Charles has said he hated it. Psychologically speaking, this matters. That kind of upbringing breeds two things: an intense craving for approval and a lifelong suspicion that your toast will always be slightly burnt. But before I forget, if you're enjoying these deep dives into the chaos of world leaders, hit that subscribe button. Your support honestly keeps me motivated to keep making more for you. Fast forward, Charles grows up into the royal adult we know today. Sensitive, a bit awkward, very much into nature. He became known as the prince who talked to his plants. And yes, he really did admit that he chats with them. Imagine being so lonely in your 20s that your best conversation partner is a rosebush. And then imagine that the rosebush is probably a better listener than your father, Prince Philip, who thought emotions were best cured by sarcasm and polo. From a personality point of view, Charles shows signs of what psychologists call openness to experience. This is the trait that makes people curious, imaginative, sometimes eccentric, and in his case, extremely into architecture, organic farming, and, let's not forget, homeopathy. Yes, the King of the United Kingdom has spent years advocating for alternative medicine, despite the fact that most scientists roll their eyes so hard they practically dislocate them. But what about his relationships? Well, we cannot avoid the Diana years. Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981 in a wedding that looked like a Disney film scripted by lawyers. The problem? He was already in love with Camilla Parker Bowles and everybody knew it, including Diana. From a psychological angle, this shows Charles's deep struggle with duty versus desire. His entire life was about doing what was expected of him, so when it came to marriage, he followed the script. And then he promptly set fire to the script by continuing his affair. The fallout was catastrophic for his public image. In the 90s, Charles was about as popular as a parking ticket. Diana was glamorous, tragic, adored by the world, and Charles was the awkward man who had cheated on her. Even his private phone calls with Camilla leaked, where he expressed a wish to be reincarnated as her tampon. Yes, that's real. The future King of England once said that. Forget Freud, even Shakespeare wouldn't know what to do with that one. Now let's pull back. What does all this say about his personality? Charles is a man deeply torn between two opposing forces. On one side, the heavy weight of royal duty. On the other, a very human desire for affection, validation, and let's face it, a quiet life in the garden with his plants. This duality makes him look indecisive, sometimes weak, but it also makes him strangely relatable. Because haven't we all wanted to ignore our responsibilities and instead just sit outside talking to the petunias? But here's where it gets interesting. Now he's king, and unlike his mother, who managed to keep her opinions locked in an underground vault next to the crown jewels, Charles has a history of talking. Letters, speeches, private memos to ministers, sometimes called the Black Spider memos because of his messy handwriting. In these, he lobbied on issues like architecture, the environment, and healthcare. For decades, people worried, would he stay quiet once he became king? Which brings us neatly to today, with the UK under the leadership of Keir Starmer, a man accused of running an increasingly authoritarian government. So what does Charles think? Well, officially, nothing. The king is constitutionally required to remain neutral, which means if the Prime Minister introduced a law banning tea bags, Charles would still have to smile politely at the press conference. But unofficially, based on his past behaviour, Charles is not exactly the type to sit silently. He believes in causes. He spent decades warning about climate change when most politicians thought recycling meant using the same tie twice. So it is reasonable to assume he looks at authoritarian tendencies with concern. He's a man who values tradition, yes, but also balance and moderation. Authoritarianism clashes with his self-image as protector of the people, the land, and, let's be honest, his tomatoes. So what is he doing about it? Probably very little, outwardly. He's bound by the rules of monarchy. But behind closed doors, we know Charles writes letters. We know he nudges politicians in private, so it's entirely possible that he's raising an eyebrow, dropping a carefully worded hint, and reminding the Prime Minister that Britain did, in fact, invent parliamentary democracy, not whatever this is turning into. But here's the dilemma. If he pushes too hard, he risks a constitutional crisis. If he does nothing, he looks like a silent bystander. So what should he do? Well, in my completely unqualified opinion, Charles should lean into his role as a kind of moral compass. Not political, not partisan, but reminding people about values like fairness, balance, and liberty. And if he can do that while planting trees and avoiding tampon references, he might actually strengthen the monarchy rather than weaken it. Let's step back into the personality lab again. Charles shows strong traits of conscientiousness that drive to fulfill obligations even when it makes you miserable. He also demonstrates agreeableness, sometimes too much, which is why he's often accused of being indecisive. But the eccentric streak, that's all him. Most monarchs in history were obsessed with power. Charles is obsessed with sustainable farming methods and whether a new building looks ugly. It's like putting an art teacher in charge of an empire. Somebody once asked me if Charles could be considered narcissistic. The answer is, not in the classic sense. Narcissists crave admiration at all costs. Charles craves approval, but also genuinely wants to improve things, even if his methods are occasionally bizarre. Think less. Look at me. I'm the centre of the universe. And more, please like me. And also, here's a pamphlet on soil health. Now quirks. The man travels with his own toilet seat. He allegedly insists his shoelaces are ironed, and his breakfast requirements have been described as complicated enough to make a Michelin star chef weep. These habits scream high levels of neuroticism, a trait that makes people anxious, perfectionist, and deeply uncomfortable when things are out of place. Combine that with the pressure of being king, and you get a man who probably wakes up sweating at the thought of the wrong kind of pen at a signing ceremony. And yes, we all saw the clip where he threw a pen away in frustration because it leaked ink on him. The man looked like he had just been personally betrayed by a bic. So, is Charles a good king? That depends on what you want from a monarch. If you want charisma, he's no Diana. If you want iron discipline, he's no Elizabeth. But if you want someone who genuinely cares about the environment, talks to trees, and probably thinks Starmer should cool it with the authoritarian vibes, then yes, he's your guy. But Charles's challenge is this. The monarchy survives on relevance. His mother embodied stability. He embodies awkward earnestness, which in a strange way might be exactly what Britain needs in difficult times. Not another politician, not another strongman, just an aging man in a crown who really, really wants you to compost. To wrap up, Charles is a fascinating contradiction. A man born into unimaginable privilege who still comes across as insecure. A king with immense symbolic power who is constitutionally powerless. A supposed symbol of tradition who spends his time warning about the future of the planet. And now a monarch quietly trying to navigate the shadow of what some call an authoritarian Starmer government, all while making sure his organic biscuits are served at the right temperature. So next time you see him on TV, smiling politely, shaking hands with people who secretly want a selfie, remember this. Behind that royal composure is a man who spent his life waiting for the job, got it late, and is now trying to figure out how to be relevant without accidentally starting a political crisis. And honestly, that might be the most human thing about him. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe before Charles writes me a strongly worded letter in black spider handwriting.